And the first week I was helping lead a retreat, but sitting for about 4 or 5 hours a day, co-leading a retreat. And then the next 4.5 weeks I was at Forest Refuge in Barrie. It's a self-retreat center. And then the last 10 days I was at IMS with the Joseph Goldstein retreat. Anyone heard of Joseph Goldstein? I apply for every one of his retreats. They have lottery, and I never get in. So I applied thinking, oh, whatever. And then they sent me an email saying, you got in. So it extended my retreat, which was great. Anyhow, the day before I left on retreat, my son, who also sits, meditates, and teaches, came to visit me. And he knows that every year I try to go on at least a month-long retreat to deepen my practice. Because even though I meditate a lot during the day, I find nothing is better for me than intensive, day in, day out, silent practice. I mean, it catapults awareness and insight and concentration. It's just amazing. So every year I choose to focus on some theme, right? Like one year my theme was dukkha, suffering, and I wanted to get really intimate during this month with suffering, really get to know suffering and in this body, in this incarnation. Another one I worked on impermanence was my theme. I did the 3 characteristics, another one not self. That was really interesting. So I've done a lot of different themes. And my son said, so Mom, what's your theme this retreat? And I said, I don't know. Because I was waiting for the theme to present itself. Usually one's there like, work on me, because it's something that's really screaming in my life. But there was nothing. So since there was nothing, I'm sitting there going, I have total equanimity about not having a theme. And then I was like, oh, equanimity. So I decided to focus on equanimity for this retreat. And what conditions support equanimity to arise, what conditions detract from equanimity, take away from it, and anything having to do with equanimity. So equanimity is really misunderstood by a lot of practitioners. Not everyone, but a lot of people kind of view equanimity as this dry aloofness or neutrality that's, it's just kind of disconnected from everything. But equanimity couldn't be further from the truth. There's a deep connection when there's equanimity. There's a deep presence. We know exactly the awareness is really right there, mindful awareness. Mature equanimity produces a radiance, a kindness, a warmth of being, a turning towards, an enveloping, a kind of hugging of the present moment. Right? So there's not this distracted or disconnected aloofness. The Buddha described a mind filled with equanimity as abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. This sounds pretty good, doesn't it? So equanimity in Buddhism is called upekkha in Pali language, and it means to look over. I've heard it described as standing on the tip of a huge tall mountain where you can see 360 degrees around you, the landscape, so where you can see everything. Right? But equanimity arises from, I think I was pointing to, observation, power of observation, the power of mindful awareness, of presence. And it's the ability to see what's happening without getting caught, stuck, and either reaching for and trying to hold on to or grab or keep, and without pushing away and wanting to get rid of. right? So we're standing on that mountain, we're not trying to pull anything that we're seeing to us, and we're not trying to get away from anything as well. And when equanimity is well developed, it brings this incredible sense of peace, okayness, aliveness. Even if the situation or the conditions totally are unpleasant. So you can have equanimity even in the midst of chaos and unpleasantness. Which when your practice deepens, you'll see this. You'll be able to be with it. There's also a lot of wisdom with equanimity. So it's not just seeing things clearly, it's also seeing things with a deep understanding of the nature of reality. So you're not just seeing the positive or the gleeful or the wonderful, you're seeing the full landscape of the situation. The good, the bad, the ugly, the difficult, the beautiful, right? And you're willing to hold that all with equal kindness and love. So there's a patience, wise presence that we bring to this moment, and then equanimity arises. And then from that, an inner strength and stability and tranquility, we're actually cultivating that capacity with this equanimity. It's also a liberating quality that allows ourselves to keep our hearts open, right? Instead of, I need to armor my heart against this person, armor my heart against this situation. The more equanimity we feel, the more courage and confidence we have that we can keep our heart open to whatever situation happens, right, arises. So equanimity in Buddhism is a big deal. Have you noticed that? Right? Equanimity is the mind state or the life force that protects us from the 8 worldly winds: praise and blame, profit and loss, pain and pleasure, and fame and disrepute. So that buffers us from the pain and suffering when we're experiencing some of the unpleasant ones. Right? It's also one of the 4 loving abodes, along with loving kindness and compassion and joy. And it's considered the ground for wisdom and freedom and the protector of love and compassion. That's beautiful. And it's also a factor of enlightenment. One of the factors of enlightenment, the 7th one. And I've heard that liberation or awakening is called the highest form of equanimity. So it's been called, that's also one of these exalted states, liberation itself. So the first day I'm on retreat and I'm practicing and I'm like, equanimity, I'm looking for equanimity and noticing equanimity, I'm opening up to equanimity when it was there. But then the second day I realized I couldn't just focus on equanimity without bringing in the other 6 factors of enlightenment. Because the other 6 factors of enlightenment, well, first of all, the Buddha called them the 7 factors of enlightenment. And if you have the 7 factors well developed within your practice, you are creating the conditions for awakening and liberation to happen. So we want to try to cultivate these qualities, practices within ourselves, the 7 factors of enlightenment. And when the other 6 are balanced and present, then equanimity is the natural response. Equanimity will be there if the other 6 factors are there. Right? So if any one of these factors is dominating, and I'll tell you what the factors are in a minute. You're like, what are the factors? Right? But if any of them is dominating and some are weak, you will not experience equanimity. right? So if you can focus on the 6 other factors of enlightenment, then equanimity will arrive. So I'll keep you in suspense just one more minute here. So the Buddha, this is a quote, he was giving a teaching to Kassapa. And he said, Kassapa, these 7 factors of enlightenment are well expounded by me, cultivated and much developed by me. And when cultivated and much developed, they conduce to full realization, perfect wisdom, to Nibbana. What are the 7? Mindfulness. Anybody guess that may have been one of them? Sati. Keen investigation. Dhamma vichaya. Energy, viriya. So these are the first 6 I'm telling you. Happiness, joy. Piti. Calm or tranquility is one of the factors. Passaddhi. And concentration or samadhi. So those are the 6 that when they're balanced and they're present, you're going to naturally have equanimity. So I noticed on retreat that first I was focusing a lot on developing my concentration and getting one-pointed concentration. I was reading a book that Don suggested from Chuladasa, The Illuminated Mind, or The Mind Illuminated, something like that. And he really, really focused on one-pointed concentration, one-pointed awareness. Right? So at first I'm like focusing on, well, I'm going to develop my concentration and get that really well developed, because everything springs from concentration. And the first 5 or 6 days of my retreat, I was so blissful and concentrated, and it was just peaceful, and I was like, ah. It's like lying in bed after a long, hard day and you're exhausted. You know that feeling? You're like, ah. And I was like, wow, this retreat is amazing. Right? And usually when I go on retreat, my karma, for some reason, has a lot of anxiety come up on retreat. A lot of anxiety. So after 5 or 6 days, I'm like, no anxiety. This is great. Maybe I finally cleared this karma. Yay! And the next day, I was hit by a whirlwind of anxiety, right? And so, I teach this stuff. I know how to deal with it. I've been dealing with anxiety for how old am I now? But I've gotten really good at it. But usually during daily life, I don't have much anxiety. Unless I get really stressed out, a lot of things hitting me, then anxiety will come, because my meditation practice really supports and not having, anxiety. But when you go on, you do deep practice, there is a stage called purification of the mind we were talking about last night at the book club. And what purification of the mind does is it brings up any of these hindrances or defilements from you karmically, or that are in your being that are unhealed, that need to come up to be healed, to be felt, to be released, or whatever, however you want to perceive it. So for some reason, my purification of the mind usually comes out with this energy of tremendous anxiety. So I decided to become really curious about it. Okay, it's my practice. What's going on here? And what I noticed is it wasn't anxiety, it was a lot of energy. So the first day I'm like, oh, this is not anxiety, this is energy. And it felt like, someone took a metal ball and it was just slamming around inside of me all over the place. And that my body felt like it was literally shaking. When I opened my eyes, nothing was shaking. right? My breath was shallow, so then I'm like, oh, okay, breathe. It was really interesting. So the first couple days, it was just a lot of energy, but then it turned into full-blown real anxiety. And I tried a lot of different ways to deal with the anxiety, to bring tranquility, right? And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But these factors of enlightenment, there are 3 energizing factors that you want to bring into your practice. If you're feeling sluggish, you're prone to falling asleep, you want to bring in did anyone guess which one of them is for sure you want to bring in? Energy. Energy, right? So that's you want to bring in energy. You want to bring in joy, because joy is an energizing factor. You want to bring in investigation, because that's an energizing factor. So it was really interesting. I would read about 20 pages a day of this book, and if you haven't read the book and you want to get the most out of your meditation practice, I suggest you read it. It's an amazing resource. But he described dullness in the mind. This was the first week before the huge energy hit. But I was like, all this time I thought I was resting in spacious awareness, and I realized, oh, I'm often in a real dull place because there's not a lot of mindful awareness when I'm in this real spacious place. It's kind of like floating around and without much mindful awareness. So I'm like, oh, I need to bring in more mindful awareness, more investigation into this spacious place, right? So you want to keep an eye on your energy. If it's dull, if it's sluggish, if it's spacey, bring in one of these energizing factors. And so I was monitoring these and doing that. Mindfulness is the balancing factor of all of them, and you want mindful awareness to be there every second you can. Right? So that was my top priority, whether I was energized through the roof or falling asleep. I wanted that mindful awareness to be really, strong. And that's what I kept bringing to the forefront. Awareness of the present moment without judging it, without trying to get rid of anything, with open, accepting, and allowing heart to the moment. That's the mindfulness I was cultivating or attempting to bring. So the other 3 factors are the relaxing or calming factors. So if the energy is way too strong, you're anxious, you're nervous, you're restless, then you want to bring these factors to bear. The tranquility factor, right? Bring more tranquility in. You want to bring in more concentration to your practice. That's the, paying attention in consecutive moments, having awareness in consecutive moments. And then, of course, equanimity is also a calming factor that you want to bring in. So I was doing a lot of bringing these factors in, especially the concentration. I was like, okay, let me up my concentration to calm this energy down. And guess what was happening? The opposite, right? So what was really interesting is the beginning of the day, I was up until like 4 p.m. I was very concentrated, extremely peaceful, feeling a lot of love and just really right there with my awareness, meditating every minute. It was great. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then around 4:35 p.m. every day, the huge energy hit. And so then I was doing all this, trying to up the concentration to get more tranquility, and it was just getting exponentially higher. And then one of the teachers said, maybe your concentration is too high. And I said, what? That's a calming factor. And she said, well, if your concentration is really high, you'll get extra piti, which can come across as really high energy. So then I switched my practice to bring in more space, right? And I tried a lot of different things. One of them is, anybody heard of nada? So nada is this, I hear this sound, they call it the sound of the universe. It sounds like high-pitched cricket sound, and it's really spacious. And for me, it's extremely calming and supportive, feels nurturing. And so I would open up to nada when I was really anxious or feeling a lot of energy and just resting in the nada. Opening up to spacious awareness, opening up to open awareness, opening up to choiceless awareness, which is where you just open up to whatever your present most dominant experience is. So I was trying a lot of different things. But the main thing I was doing is saying, can I be with this with equanimity? Can I open up to this energy with kindness and allow it to be there? So the 7 factors of enlightenment during the times of the Buddha was used to heal people. So when people were really sick, the Buddha instructed they would tell people the 7 factors of enlightenment and expound upon the 7, give a talk to the sick person. In fact, one time the Buddha was very ill, and he asked one of his students to give him a talk on the 7 factors of enlightenment, and as the story goes, that he got better after he heard the 7 factors of enlightenment. Yeah. During the retreat, I did an hour every morning of loving kindness practice. Remember your intentions that you wrote? So I put them in a little purse, and I held the purse in my hands. And I did loving kindness practice, sending a lot of good wishes to y'all, and me, and the rest of the world. And that I found was very balancing. Starting each day out with loving kindness is a great way to prepare the mind for whatever comes that day. I also saw with this anxious energy, because that was my challenge during this retreat, that sometimes I was like, okay, what precedes this anxiety? So I tried everything. Maybe I'm eating too much, so I'll cut down on my food. Well, maybe I shouldn't eat any dinner, so I'll fast tonight. So I tried, you name it, I tried it. And nothing helped. Nothing changed it. So then I finally realized that this anxiety, this high, difficult energy was not a result of any conditions in the world. Not a result of any worldly conditions. Which was good for me to finally realize it and quit trying to jump through a bunch of hoops. But I said, okay, what does precede? Can I pinpoint the exact moment that the anxiety starts to build, and what if there's any kind of thought stream or anything preceding it? And I noticed that a lot of times it would just arise, and it didn't happen every evening. So I had a few breaks. I didn't know why. Anyhow, but I enjoyed them. Sometimes restlessness preceded the anxiety. Sometimes a little anger or frustration with another retreatant or something, which my mind would grab hold of, and then anxiety would come. Sometimes feeling really lonely, like, geez, I have to go one more day, not to connect with anybody, and then anxiety would arise. So what I saw clearly was that this incarnation, this nervous system, responds to any kind of stress with anxiety. Yay me! Lucky me. Anyhow, anybody feel the same way? Okay, stress, anxiety, stress, anxiety. So I'm getting really good in this incarnation and learning to work with this energy. But so what I really noticed was that I'm just going to get to the. Oh, I also tried counting my breaths like a crazy person. 1, 2, 3. You know, like that's how it felt inside. And sometimes that really worked. But what I found worked the best, this was about a week, 3 weeks into my anxiety bouts, was body scanning. Anybody do body scanning? So I thought, no way I could go to the body feels so uncomfortable, but I tried it one night intuitively and it worked. I could be with my forehead and all the sensations jumping in my forehead, and it didn't seem that bad. I could be with my eyes and my nose and my throat, and, you know, and be with all the sensations in this area. But when I was with my whole self, with the whole body at once, it felt like I was crumbling and shaking. Yeah, so bringing equanimity to all that. So I really enjoyed doing a lot of body scanning, and then it would come and would go. I never knew why, I never saw what preceded it. And one night the anxiety got so bad, and I was just sitting there, and I just completely surrendered to it. I'm like, you know what? I'm all yours. I was trying everything to get rid of it, to bring more tranquility, to balance, to bring these, you know, this is it. I'm surrendering. I have surrendered. I'm all yours. Bring it on. I want to feel this. Come on, anxiety. I love you. And guess what happened? Anybody? It went away! And then when it did re-arrive, which it will, there was tremendous equanimity. Right? It's like, oh, this is my friend, anxiety. Right? I'm not, because I saw very subtly that I was trying to get rid of it. That I was trying to balance it, trying to deal with it, trying to manage it. Right? What does that cause? Hello? More. Right? God, it only took me 32 years of meditating with this energy I've seen that before, but not at this deep level. So I feel really good about having equanimity with anxiety. And since I've come home, I've had plenty of opportunity to practice this equanimity, because I don't know if you've ever been on retreat, but my mind is slowed way down, but life is coming really fast, which is somewhat stressful. Yeah. But then I went to IMS with Joseph Goldstein, and I had so much equanimity. I was in this blissful, wonderful place, and until the chemical sensitivity hit. Anybody hear of chemical sensitivity? Well, I do. And when I'm on retreat, it gets much more multiplied, because I become even more sensitive. And what happens is when someone's doused with any kind of perfume smell at all, my sinuses start to, you know, I have to clear my throat a lot, they start to drain. Sinuses will burn, my eyes will burn, my throat will burn, and sometimes I get queasy and have to get sick to my stomach. But here I am on this IMS retreat, and there's no scent. It's part of the rules. No scent. It's a scent-free environment, right? And everywhere I went, guess who sat next to me?
The scented person.
You guys are geniuses, right? I call them stink bombs. It was like I was a magnet to stink bombs, and then, you know, and I'm saying aversion, judgment, anger. Oh, there's a lot of anger. It's in my chest. It's in my throat. Desire to smack this person next to me, revenge, I'm going to go complain at the office. You know, so I'm having to be present with all this aversion and anger and frustration. And then about 6 days into my retreat, there was this place I love to meditate in the evening, between for an hour and a half every evening, to 6 to 7:30. There were these 4 really nice stuffed chairs in this hallway, and I went and sat in the 3rd chair. And I've been doing this all week long with the stink bombs, you know, getting to the place of equanimity. And I'm sitting there meditating. Oh, it was wonderful. And then a stink bomb sits to my left. You know, so I start doing this practice, anger, all this stuff. And then I start to feel a little bit of peace, and a stink bomb sits to my right. Right? And then I'm like, and I got so worked up. There was no equanimity possible. There was nothing but anger and aversion. So I went to my room. I'm like, I can't meditate here. I went to my room, and I decided to do what I asked all my students to do, which was open up to my experience. And I opened up to my experience completely. You know, quit trying to manage all this, be with the, and I just started bawling. Because what I realized was this was really hard. 6 days of dealing with this. You know, half of the people there were wearing scented, I'm sure of it, products. At least half. So I brought my hands to my heart. I felt so much self-compassion for how hard this was to be with this. And then I felt so much equanimity. Right? The next 3 days, there were still stink bombs here and there, and I still had the sinus drainage and still had some of the burning and stuff, but it didn't bother me emotionally. Does it make any sense? Yeah. So it was just, okay, yeah. So there wasn't the suffering, there was just a little bit of discomfort. And I got, so those are some of my experiences with equanimity. But the main thing is when equanimity was present, I really chose to open up to it. Like, wow. Tranquility was present, opening up to that. Any of the 7 factors of enlightenment, they were all there. Really appreciating. But what I noticed around 2 or 3 weeks into, there was something missing. And I couldn't figure out what it was. I was like, what's missing? I've got the tranquility, I've got the concentration, I've got the energy, got the investigation. Joy? Hello? Joy? Right? I was turning it into a job. So then I started opening up to joy, and that's when everything started falling into place. That's when the equanimity was really prevalent. So the whole retreat, I had to learn to keep opening up to beauty, to love, to joy. On the 3rd day of my Joseph Goldstein retreat, I got a message that my best friend Bill had a stroke. And he was in the hospital, and he needed surgery, and they didn't know. And I was like, should I leave? Should I not leave? I should leave. I should be there with him. I shouldn't be here. I should be with. And so the mind was like, what should I do? And then the wise part of me said, sit and wait. Sit and wait. Let the answer come to you. Let the answer, whether you should leave or not, arrive. The wisdom, the knowing. That was kind of hard. So I sat with that for a few hours, and then there was a deep knowing that he was going to be okay, and that I needed to continue my retreat. And I texted him and said, do you want me to come? I'll come on the next plane. He said, no, my daughter's here. She's flown in. do your retreat. I'll see you when you get done. And I said, okay. And then I had equanimity about it. It's really interesting, but yeah, so my retreat was all about equanimity, could you tell? And the lack thereof, and learning what brought peace and joy. And I saw that the factors of enlightenment do work together to create equanimity. And there's so much more. But you'll hear about it for the next few years. Here's by Shanti Deva, Miracle of Awakening. As a blind man feels when he finds a pearl in a dustbin, so am I amazed by the miracle of awakening rising in my consciousness. It is the nectar of immortality that delivers us from death, the treasure that lifts us above poverty into the wealth of giving to life, the tree that gives shade to us when we roam about scorched by life, the bridge that takes us across the stormy river of life, the cool moon of compassion that calms our mind when it's agitated, the sun that dispels darkness, the butter made from the milk of kindness by churning it with the Dharma. It is the feast of joy to which all are invited. So I hope your heart and your mind are filled with equanimity. Thank you for listening.
What's the name of the book again?